Put up her sleeve and looked right at him, and just as they gave her a shot, she never winced.
Oh,
and my,
really?
my 6-year-old boy was just dying, but my gentle boy was here, and Grace was, no, gets it now.
Wow.
I know.
Yeah. He had to go along with it, I guess, huh?
I mean, she's the one that puts me in my place for sure.
Have you heard what happened to Kevin Costner? For decades, Kevin Costner was the kind of Hollywood name that carried weight on its own. He didn't just act in films. He helped define entire eras of American cinema, from sports dramas to sweeping Western epics. His presence on screen felt steady, almost unshakable. But in recent years, that image has shifted in a way few people expected. Behind the awards, the fame, and the legacy roles, a more complicated story has been unfolding, one marked by career risks, personal upheaval, and industry tensions that have slowly changed how Hollywood sees him today. To understand how things reached this point, you have to go back to the foundation of his journey. Kevin Costner did not grow up in luxury or near the entertainment industry. His early life was shaped by constant movement, a working-class household, and a sense of instability that came from never staying in one place too long. His father worked physically demanding jobs, and the family often relocated for work. That experience created a grounded personality in Costner, someone who learned to adapt quickly but never fully rooted himself in comfort. As a young man, acting was not his original plan. He studied business and marketing in college, aiming for a stable career rather than a creative one. For a time, his life looked completely ordinary. He took regular jobs, considered office work, and lived a life far removed from Hollywood dreams. Even after graduating, there was no immediate sign that he would become a major film star. Acting started more as curiosity than ambition. But something changed in his early adulthood. Small encounters, unexpected encouragement, and a growing interest in performance slowly pulled him toward the screen. Like many actors who eventually break through, his early career was built on uncertainty. He took minor roles, appeared in projects that barely made an impact, and even had finished scenes cut from films that later became successful without him. There were moments when his career almost ended before it properly began. He came close to giving up acting entirely, thinking about returning to business for stability. But persistence kept him moving forward. Then, almost suddenly, everything shifted. By the mid to late 1980s, Costner began landing roles that would change his trajectory. Films like The Untouchables positioned him as a serious actor with quiet intensity. He wasn't flashy, but he had something audiences trusted. That trust became his signature. Soon after, a string of successful films turned him into one of Hollywood's most recognizable leading men. Sports dramas and emotional storytelling projects helped define his public image as the calm, reliable American hero. Then came his biggest leap, moving from actor to filmmaker. Dances with Wolves was a massive risk at the time. Westerns were not considered a safe genre, and Costner was still primarily known as an actor, not a director. But the film became a defining success, earning top industry honors and cementing his reputation as more than just a star. He was now a creative force in Hollywood. For a period afterward, everything seemed to align perfectly. He starred in major films, delivered strong performances, and became one of the highest-paid actors in the industry. His name alone could greenlight projects. He wasn't just working in Hollywood. He was influencing its direction. But success at that level often brings pressure, and that pressure eventually began to show. In the mid-1990s, he took on ambitious projects that required massive budgets and carried huge expectations. One of them, a futuristic survival epic set in a flooded world, became one of the most talked-about productions of its time, not only for its scale, but for its troubled development. Reports of production issues and rising costs created a narrative of chaos surrounding the film before audiences even saw it. Although it performed reasonably well financially, the damage to its reputation stuck. It became labeled as a Hollywood excess story, and Costner's image shifted from unstoppable star to risky investment. That perception deepened with another ambitious project he directed and starred in later, which failed commercially and received harsh critical response. These setbacks marked the beginning of a long, slow decline in his standing as a guaranteed box office draw. At the same time, his personal life was undergoing major changes. His long marriage ended after many years together, and the separation was widely covered in the media. The divorce became part of the public narrative around him, reinforcing the idea that both his professional and personal worlds were under strain. As often happens in celebrity culture, the two stories began feeding into each other. Throughout the early 2000s, Costner's career entered a different phase. He was still working, but the roles were less dominant than before. He explored directing again, took on smaller acting parts, and even pursued music with a country rock band. These choices were unexpected to many observers, but they reflected a shift in priorities rather than a complete withdrawal. He was no longer just chasing blockbuster dominance. He was exploring different creative outlets. There were moments of resurgence during this period. Certain performances reminded audiences of his earlier strength, and critics occasionally pointed to possible comebacks. But none of these moments fully restored his previous status. Instead, his career settled into a pattern of respect without dominance, still valued, but no longer central to Hollywood's biggest conversations. That changed again in the late 2010s. A television project centered around a powerful ranching family in modern America became an unexpected cultural phenomenon. Costner's role as the family patriarch brought him back into the spotlight in a way few anticipated. The show grew steadily, eventually becoming one of the most watched series on television. Suddenly, he wasn't a fading movie star. He was the face of one of the most influential modern TV dramas. This resurgence was significant. It reintroduced him to a younger audience and reminded the industry of his ability to carry major projects. Awards followed, along with renewed media attention and a sense that he had successfully reinvented himself in a new era of entertainment. But behind the scenes, tensions began to build. As the show expanded in popularity, production demands increased. Scheduling became more complex, creative differences started to emerge, and disagreements over direction and workload reportedly grew more serious. Costner, meanwhile, was developing a large-scale personal film project that required significant time and attention. The competing demands created friction between his commitments. Reports later suggested that negotiations over filming schedules and creative control became increasingly difficult. What began as standard production planning evolved into deeper disagreements about priorities and storytelling direction. At the same time, Costner was spending more time on his own multi-part Western film project, which required extensive personal investment. Eventually, the situation reached a breaking point. Costner stepped away from the television series, confirming publicly that he would not continue in the role going forward. The announcement marked a major turning point, not just for the show, but for his career narrative. What had been a triumphant return to cultural relevance now became another moment of controversy and speculation. Around the same period, his personal life again became headline news as his second marriage ended. The divorce proceedings attracted significant attention, particularly due to financial discussions and lifestyle details that became public. Once again, his private struggles overlapped with professional turbulence, reinforcing a narrative of instability that followed him through the media cycle. Meanwhile, his ambitious film project became a subject of intense scrutiny. Designed as a large-scale Western saga, it required massive funding and long production timelines. While creatively ambitious, it also carried substantial financial risk. Reports about production challenges, legal disputes involving crew members, and delays added pressure to an already complicated situation. What was intended as a passion project began to look, from the outside, like a heavy financial burden. As these developments accumulated, the industry's tone toward Costner began to change. Instead of viewing him as a guaranteed star, conversations started focusing on risk management. Insurance concerns, production costs, and scheduling reliability became part of how studios assessed him. This shift didn't erase his legacy, but it did affect how future opportunities were considered. Still, Costner did not step away from filmmaking. He continued to express commitment to storytelling and maintained that he still had creative goals he wanted to pursue. Even as criticism grew louder, he remained active, taking on new projects and exploring different formats. His approach suggested persistence rather than retreat. By the mid-2020s, his position in Hollywood had become complex. He was no longer at the peak of his box office dominance, but he was far from forgotten. Instead, he occupied a space between legacy and reinvention, respected for his past, scrutinized in the present, and uncertain in terms of what would come next. What makes his story stand out is not just the rise or the decline, but the constant movement between both. Few actors have experienced such clear peaks of cultural influence, followed by equally visible challenges. Even fewer have managed to return to relevance more than once across different decades. Today, Kevin Costner's career sits at a crossroads. On one hand, he remains a recognizable and respected figure in entertainment history. On the other, his recent years reflect the difficulties of sustaining relevance in an industry that changes quickly and often without warning. Whether his next chapter becomes a final comeback or a gradual step back remains uncertain. What is clear, however, is that his story is not simply about success or failure. It is about longevity, ambition, and the cost of trying to balance creative control with an industry that constantly shifts beneath your feet. And that is why, even now, people still ask the same question: what exactly happened to Kevin Costner?